ChatGPT Plus is free for college students through May. Here's the thing. You've got a lot to do between now and then. Studying for finals, writing papers, trying to keep your life on track. And ChatGPT can help with all of it. It can quiz you for your econ exam, make a study guide from your French notes, plan out your meals and study breaks. It can get really specific on how you like to learn. It can even help you come up with ways to stop procrastinating. So from now until summer break, take advantage of all the ways ChatGPT can make your life easier. Restrictions apply.
It's The Other Side of Midnight with Frank Morano.
This is The Other Side of Midnight. I'm Frank Morano. Well, a lot of you may remember the interview we did a couple of weeks ago with John Ray. John Ray is an attorney who's representing several of the families of victims of the Long Island serial killer. Now, we know that Rex Heuermann is charged with being the Gilgo Beach killer. But it was something very interesting happened a day or two before Thanksgiving. Lindsay Henry, a politician out on Long Island, was arrested for apparently strangling his daughter. At least that's what was reported. Now, what in the world could Lindsay Henry have to do with the Long Island serial killer? I don't know, but his name over the years has popped up in the rumor mill of this situation, and now his name may be popping up in being connected to some other very serious crimes. Well, the guy who knows this situation backwards and forwards is the aforementioned John Ray. He's very kind to join us once more. John, great to talk with you. I hope you had a nice Thanksgiving.
I did, and thank you for having me again, Frank. It's nice. You're one of I think you're the number one guy in my book for asking questions.
Wow, I appreciate that.
Like you do. You're really
I'm
good
certainly not going to be the number one guy for giving answers, so at least I have some feather in my cap.
Right.
Now, some people may be listening around the country and think, oh, what's the big deal? Local politicians get in trouble all the time. This case is a little bit different, and it does have some national implications potentially. First, give us the basics so folks, especially folks who don't live on Long Island, understand what we're talking about. Who is Lindsay Henry?
Oh, Lindsay's a lawyer of many years in Suffolk County. His dad was the district attorney of Suffolk County, and then for many years he had become a state Supreme Court judge. And his name is Patrick Henry. And before that, I believe their grandfather also played a role in politics. So he's from Babylon. He's been around. He does a lot of criminal and family court work, and I think some other work as well. I believe he's on his own as a sole practitioner. I mean, that at this moment anyway, that's the last I had heard. And he's been, playing a role in politics himself. He ran for office. I think he's appointed to some boards or some such thing with the government, and in Babylon, that is.
Gotcha.
So he's connected through both himself and his family with the political scene in Suffolk County and the social scene as well.
Gotcha. What was he arrested for most recently?
I saw an arraignment in a district court document that showed that he had been arrested for blocking someone's airwaves, in their breathing, which the way I read it, it sounded like a felony, but I wasn't sure it was. It could have been a misdemeanor. I just didn't take sure. The opportunity to check it out and find out and get in the rumor mill. I try to avoid that.
Understood. Now, as I alluded, his name has popped up several times over the years in terms of potentially being connected to the Gilgo Beach case. Now, obviously, he's never been arrested for that, and someone else has been arrested on that one. But why was his name constantly swirling around these Gilgo Beach killings?
Well, it's really hard to say what causes these kinds of words and thoughts to emanate. I'm not the originator of any of it, and So I hear about it the way you've heard about it, and I don't really. It's very hard to know who started this. But, did it come from this thought? Come from perhaps Lindsay himself? Did it come from somebody else of bad repute who really can't be trusted, or are these trustworthy things? I don't know. That's an open question.
Mm-hmm.
But certainly he's been. His name has come up in connection with the investigation regarding Gilgo Beach, and I don't know, more than that, I don't know as to what the police law is about him. I do know that, it just so happens that I represented two of his girlfriends, and I have spoken to several others of his girlfriends. So from them, I've heard a great deal of more certain facts regarding Lindsay. So.
Gotcha. Now, I know that he was once accused by a sex worker as being a possible suspect, and that same sex worker claimed that disgraced Suffolk County Police Chief James Burke paid her for sex at an Oak Beach sex party. Henry, obviously, as I alluded to, was never connected to those crimes, but a lot of, I guess we'll call online sleuths, still discuss him as part of that Oak Beach universe. I'm imagining there's a good chance you're familiar with that sex worker and her claims. Does she strike you as a credible person?
Well, she's been my client, and in several matters. So I know her well. And her story about what happened to her in Oak Beach was credible, and that's not with respect to Lindsay Henry. I don't mean that, but rather with respect to James Burke. Although the incidences she mentions about James Burke, for which she held a press conference with me years ago, were dealt with. Alleged parties at a politician's house in Oak Beach, and they dealt with Burke and the kind of sexual behavior that he was involved in up to his ears, and he loved to, he loved certain perverse things, and she was able to express that. Mm-hmm. He also threw money at her or on her when he finished with her. I believe the second time that he abused her, and that's right up Burke's alley. So she had some real credibility, and the interesting thing was that Burke never denied it. Mm-hmm. And there were collateral other pieces of evidence that suggested that what she was telling me was the truth.
Gotcha. At 30 minutes after the hour, this is The Other Side of Midnight. My guest is attorney John Ray. He represents a lot of people, but notably in discussing the Gilgo Beach case, he represents several of the family members of victims of the Long Island serial killer. You alluded to the fact that Lindsay Henry's father, Patrick Henry, was once a prominent figure in Suffolk County law enforcement. Do you believe that connection influenced how Lindsay's alleged past crimes were handled or investigated?
Which past crimes are you speaking
Well, so
of?
he faced allegations in 2017 for domestic assault, as I understand it, but he was somehow able to retain his position as Babylon town attorney. Now, I would think, and again, you know the culture out there a lot better than me, but I would think that suggests either some systemic problems with the system in how misconduct by public officials is addressed on Long Island, or it suggests that he's juiced in because of his family connections, or both.
Yeah, well, I had become the lawyer for the girl who was making that accusation, and there were photographs of her having been badly abused by Lindsay. And this was all reported in the newspaper, so she became a public figure. Lindsay became a public figure if he wasn't one already. And while he worked, he had a position as an assistant town attorney. I think it was a part-time job with the town of Babylon. Well, it turns out that this girl he was living with, she was under a great deal of pressure to drop her charges. And that pressure came from a variety of sources, private sources. And so I fairly and honestly represented her until the very day that she was supposed to go to trial. And, or Lindsay was supposed to go to trial, I should say. She was the chief witness. And then she crumbled and backed out of that case. She charged him again. I think she's charged him twice, and both times she's backed out.
Interesting. Well, I mean, that certainly seems to suggest something's fishy going on there. Well, I said that you didn't. So, in terms of the Gilgo Beach connection, you alluded to your past client seeming to be credible on the James Burke allegations. Do you think there's merit to the speculation that Lindsay Henry could be involved in these Gilgo Beach murders, or do you view it as more of an internet-fueled conspiracy theory?
Yeah, it's a theory, that's been brooded about, but it's just that. It's just a theory. I can't speak for. I'm probably the last one that could speak well for the Suffolk County Police Department's acumen and intentions in investigating this entire Gilgo Beach case, and especially the Shannon Gilbert case.
Mm-hmm.
So I have nothing but the utmost criticism for the work they had done for 12 years until finally, with a new police commissioner and a new district attorney, something got done because they finally turned to the obvious that had been ignored by the police for years and began to find evidence enough to arrest Rex Hoyman. But they still, in 13 years now, they still have grossly and willfully refused to investigate the case of Shannon Gilbert.
Mm-hmm.
And so I have nothing but disregard for their work on that. And I'm speaking of the police department when I say that. So there seems to be some real serious misconduct or what should I call it, dropping of the ball by the police in that regard. Mm-hmm. So how does that come into the, how that carries over into the investigation of Lindsay one way or the other, whether they, still think of him as a person of interest or they don't, I don't know, but they won't say, but Lindsay should be as much interested in this question as everybody else, because the Suffolk County Police didn't do their job on Shannon Gilbert, and then they were supposedly investigating Lindsay in respect to Shannon Gilbert and the Gilgo Beach people. So, what kind of an investigation did they conduct?
Right.
Well, you have a good example of the kind they do conduct in the Shannon Gilbert investigation, which was no investigation at all, but an entire cover-up.
So I
don't. You understand? I don't. Turning to the police department and saying, "Look, what do they know and how do they know it?" and so forth regarding Lindsay Henry, it's kind of a waste of time.
Understood.
The number one selling product of its kind with over 20 years of research and innovation. Botox Cosmetic, onabotulinum toxin A, is a prescription medicine used to temporarily make moderate to severe frown lines, crow's feet, and forehead lines look better in adults.
Effects of Botox Cosmetic may spread hours to weeks after injection, causing serious symptoms. Alert your doctor right away as difficulty swallowing, speaking, breathing, eye problems, or muscle weakness may be a sign of a life-threatening condition. Patients with these conditions before injection are at highest risk. Don't receive Botox Cosmetic if you have a skin infection. Side effects may include allergic reactions, injection site pain, headache, eyebrow and eyelid drooping, and eyelid swelling. Allergic reactions can include rash, welts, asthma symptoms, and dizziness. Tell your doctor about medical history, muscle or nerve conditions including ALS or Lou Gehrig's disease, myasthenia gravis, or Lambert-Eaton syndrome and medications, including botulinum toxins, as these may increase the risk of serious side effects. For full safety information, visit BotoxCosmetic.com or call 877-351-0300.
See for yourself at BotoxCosmetic.com.
This episode is brought to you by Factor. Optimize your nutrition this year with Factor, America's #1 ready-to-eat meal service. Factor's fresh, never frozen meals are dietitian approved, ready to eat in just 2 minutes. Choose from 40 weekly options across 8 dietary preferences like Calorie Smart, Protein Plus, and Keto. Eat smarter at factormeals.com/listen50 and use code listen50 for 50% off plus free shipping on your first box. Factormeals.com/listen50, code listen50. T's and C's apply.
Oh my God, it's the coolest thing ever. Hey guys, have you heard of Goldbelly? Well, check this out. It's this amazing site where they ship the most iconic, famous foods from restaurants across the country, anywhere nationwide. I've never found a more perfect gift than food. They ship Chicago deep dish pizza, New York bagels, Maine lobster rolls, and even Ina Garten's famous cakes. Seriously. So if you're looking for a gift for the food lover in your life, head to goldbelly.com and get 20% off your first order with promo code GIFT.
Faraday presenta Ojos con Alergia y Picazón contra el jardinero. Y el ganador es Faraday Extra Fuerte. Para aliviar la picazón de los ojos por alergia, actúa más rápido y supera a Claritin y Flonase aún a las 24 horas. Faraday, adelante.
If you're just tuning in, this is The Other Side of Midnight. I'm Frank Morano. My guest is attorney John Ray. John, I mentioned the New Bedford highway killer. If people are unfamiliar with that, that's an unidentified serial killer who was responsible for the deaths of at least 9 women and the disappearance of 2 additional women in New Bedford, Massachusetts between March of 1988 and April of 1989. The killer's also suspected to have assaulted numerous other women. And for years, there's been a lot of speculation that maybe there was some connection between the New Bedford serial killer and what was going on at Gilgo Beach. Some people are suggesting that Lindsay Henry might even be linked to the New Bedford serial killer case. How should law enforcement, understanding that you've been critical of them in the Gilgo case, how should law enforcement handle this sort of speculation, especially when it involves high-profile cold cases?
In cold cases like this, where serial killing is involved and other behaviors that emanate from that serial killing by others, in addition to the serial killers, that is, co-conspirators, other people who are involved in sexual perversions and are connected in some collateral way with the investigation, with the killer or killers, and so forth. That all needs to be thoroughly investigated. That's why you need a very large police force or a task force to do that. We don't have that here. We have a very large police force, and we have a task force, but they're not up to the job of investigating all these leads. Now, I know they did investigate that lead because some of the information for that lead came from the girls I represent, or represented at the time, rather. So didn't come from me, it came from them. And the police, I think, would have to have investigated it, whether they like to or not. Now, what kind of an investigation did they do? Anybody's guess. I mean, that if the evidence, the solid, real evidence is not handed to them on a silver platter, oftentimes, these are just dismissed as rumors and the police move on. So, the thoroughness is always a question when you have collateral things like these killings up there that seem to have some connection with the killings here in Long Island. I'm not sure they do or they don't, but I do know this, that the claim made by the women was that and it was an open claim, and that it wasn't a secret. It was given to me so that I could use it, and that was that Lindsay Henry had been a hand on a boat, worked as a seaman of some kind on a boat off the coast of Massachusetts in the same area where those girls were found. Well, so probably have 100,000 other people travel that water route. maybe more than that over time. Does that make you a suspect? No, I don't think so.
Right.
But that was it. And then there were claims of violence and claims that he was irrational and claims that he would practice cultish behaviors, things of that sort. So, of course, it would make it seem interesting. And that these girls both accused him of being a serial killer themselves. So, that all added to but that doesn't make him a serial killer.
Right, understood. And just to be clear,
that could be really bad, just bad cess, so to speak, that's coming out of them because, of their relationship with him.
Right. And just to be clear, when you say the serial killer,
it wasn't an ordinary thing.
When you say the serial killer, you mean the New Bedford serial killer?
Yeah, I mean, I could mean either of them actually when you think about it, because they were making the connection and saying that Lindsay, made hints about that. I had other people call me from Massachusetts who claimed to have been in some way hooked up with Lindsay and had bad things to say, but they were people who I don't know them. I mean, I don't go up to Massachusetts and sit down and spend days talking to them, so I don't really know what the veracity of what they were telling me was at all. So that all came when he got arrested, and his picture was in the paper, and Danielle's picture was in the paper, and so forth. That all came about. So it's in other words, if I'm sounding like I'm a bit wordy about this, it's because it's equivocal. It's not determinative that he is a suspect or should be or ever was for that matter.
We talked about James Burke, the former Suffolk County police chief. He's been linked to Oak Beach through allegations of misconduct and parties involving sex workers, including one of the people that you represented. Do you see any overlap between Burke's activities and Lindsay Henry's potential role in the Oak Beach or Gilgo Beach cases? As best you understand it, did these guys run in the same circles?
Yeah, I think in a broad sense they did, and that circle is more of a what's the right word? A volcanic cesspool that lies beneath the thin patina of respectability among some of the people who are established figures in Suffolk County. And that includes police officers, judges, attorneys, firemen, people who are in politics in other ways, people who have prominent businesses, and so forth. And there's a muck of them who have for years operated just below the surface in this filth and in the perversions that dominate a good portion of those people that I've just mentioned. Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. And I'm very aware of them. It's one of my themes in the work that I've done on this and emerged over the years is that there is there's a whole group behavior that is much more widespread than the media would report it, but people know of it. They move amongst the same bars. They hang out on the same boats. They practice the same kinds of things. They're excessively perverted. They're excessively selfish people who, they have no problem with using whatever drugs are available and so forth. And they're very often prominent people. Mm-hmm. And they all come to know one another because they associate with the same places where that kind of thing can take place, and they associate with the same kind of people who are involved in those kinds of things. And so eventually they kind of know each other, and they become part of this web, if you will, of people who are connected in the broader sense, in the spider web.
Well, let me ask you about that. With
the serial killer.
So Lindsay Henry's recent arrest for allegedly strangling his daughter highlights a pattern of violent behavior. How often do you see cases where patterns of violence by individuals in positions of power, like the people we're talking about, James Burke and others, go unaddressed until something extreme happens?
Well, you've seen it with the Volva case. That guy was a cop, right?
Mm-hmm.
And look what he did to his son, and look what his wife did to her stepson. They murdered him. And for years they were getting away with it, with torturing that little boy, and nobody did anything about it. And that's in part because of his posture, his position. And that isn't that a shining case, and shining in the ugliest way of exactly what you just asked me?
Yeah. No, you're right. That's exactly. That's a textbook.
Now we have this arrest that is much more significant in my mind than has been reported by the press so far, and that is that this police officer from where else but the town of Babylon, for years, a man who gets decorated 6 times by the Suffolk County Police Department for his good behavior or whatever they claimed about him. This guy is running 2 houses of ill repute where prostitution is occurring with mostly Asian girls, apparently, many who couldn't speak English. And he's running these for years right under the noses of the police department, supposedly under their noses, along with a gym teacher from a school and apparently others as well. And all these years he's doing this, the Oak Beach investigation dealing it very much with the people in the town of Babylon and with some of the politicians in Babylon who lived in this area, with the Oak Beach community where there's an awful lot of perversion that's built in, or was anyway, back in the day when, all these things were going on. All those people are involved, and this guy can go and freely run 2 houses of prostitution for years, and nobody notices it.
Yeah.
And pay attention carefully to what he did. There's a burglary or a robbery at one of the houses. So he's on duty, working in a precinct, and he drives with his police car during work hours, breaks his assignment, goes to another precinct to visit the house to deal with the problem that occurred. And he had complete confidence that he could do that. Now, why would this man have that complete confidence that he could do that? Because something is deeply wrong with the Suffolk County Police Department hierarchy.
And something's rotten in Denmark. Hey, John, we're going to have to end it there. I appreciate you being so generous with your time, especially late at night. Please continue to keep us posted on this, and best of luck, obviously, to the families you're representing in terms of getting some closure, at least down the line.
Well, I appreciate it. I hope I gave. Listen. My job is to try to just tell the truth, and I don't have any axe to grind against Lindsay Henry.
Neither do I, obviously.
Right. He has to deal with himself, but I'm not going to pin the tail on him as a donkey and say he's a killer. I wouldn't do that.
No, and nor would I, and that's why I appreciate
don't know
you.
It to be true.
That's why I appreciate you handling this with such sophistication and being careful. All right, John Ray has been my guest. If you want to give me a call, you could certainly do so. 646-720-0635. That's 646-720-0635. This is The Other Side of Midnight. Straight ahead.